Hello all. Yes, I'm way back from the camera this time and it feels a bit distanced for me, but you may notice I glow in the sun and the sunbeam is right in here. And of course, we have nothing covering most windows because when you sell your house, any fixtures or anything like that you want to keep, you have to remove because the sale is whoa, look at that. Look at that. Oh, I'm like a freaking Twilight vampire. That's why I'm not closer, because it does this. And you notice where the sun lands? Yeah. Do you notice the sun hits something else before it hits my face? Now you can see my fancy Halloween shirt. I heart creepy. But yeah, that's what happens. It's like regular ginger Twilight vampire. Like, look at that. I'm freaking glowing in the sun. It's ridiculous. Anyway, so, the shinies, forgive. I'm doing the best I can. I want to get this done. Speaking of the house, we have now officially sold it. Like, no conditions. Oh my God, thank God. We can actually put stuff on the counters again and take all the controversial books out and put them back on the shelf. I didn't realize how many books I had with provocative titles that may offend. That's how I roll. But we also got some cautiously good news about Binky. He has a second rare form of cancer. For people who don't know, Binky has been in cancer treatment for a lymphoma. I believe it was a lymphoma. For 2 years. He's been doing really well, like pretty much remission territory. But then he got another rare form of melanoma. Now, apparently, melanomas respond well to radiation. It's in his mouth, so they can shrink the tumor. And because his overall quality of life, he still fights like a bat out of hell. So they think that it will respond to treatment, and they think he can get about a year with good quality of life. It's going to cost us $4,000, but he's Binky. On that note, oh my God, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. I don't know if I should start a GoFundMe or something like that specifically for the radiation treatment. Let me know what you think about that. That's really embarrassing. This has been a week of humbling. But I'm considering it just because, oh my God, like, for people who've never sold a house, it's a very expensive process. You have to pump a lot of money in to get the best possible price you can get. And the market's not so good right now, but apparently our financing guy and a few other people said we got a very good price for the place. So I am very happy about that. I didn't know if I thought it was fair. We had a number, we hit the number. That's all I care about. I don't need to maximize it. I find that's a great way to end up behind. But yeah, timing. Yeah, so moving on. I guess it's a little bit related. I've been off my game. I mean, like, it's been obvious I've been making a lot of mistakes lately that I wouldn't normally make. I would check them, but I've been distracted. And when people are stressed, when people are in heightened states, they're not at the top of their game. And with everything that's been going on in the world and in the news lately, I think a lot of people are not at the top of their game lately, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. Even though it is Halloween, I originally wanted to do a Beelzebub video, but that costume is in storage. Curses. But yeah, I want to talk about how to... The title of the video is How to Talk to Traumatized People. And that's a bit of a misnomer, but I didn't know what else to call it, because it is how to communicate with people who are not not at their best at the moment for whatever. There's a lot of people a lot of people, I know on Facebook especially, other people who are Jewish who are really bothered by what happened in Pittsburgh. And I don't know, personally, I don't see that as a Jewish thing specifically. This particular guy happened to target Jews because of an anti-immigrant attitude, an anti-refugee attitude. And, HIAS is the oldest refugee resettlement charity in the world, and it happens to be Jewish. And I love their mandate. I love the way they talk about it. The fact they said, we started this initiative because they were Jews, the refugees they were resettling. It was, escaping pogroms and things like that. But they continue it because we're Jews. And I'm just like, that's a beautiful sentiment, because it's interesting. A lot we talk about charity, and someone forward me the helpers concept, and the idea of charity is much more of a Christian concept than a Jewish concept. The Jewish concept of tzedakah is, some people say the word translates to charity, but really the word translates to justice, with a side of obligation. And that's a very different mindset. The idea is not, oh, I'm such a nice person, I'm helping this person in need. That's not the idea of tzedakah. You might know that Judaism has a lot of rules. Well, those rules are to keep you humble, because no one can do them all. There's 613 commandments, and no one can do them all, because some social classes, the priest classes, the Kohanim, are forbidden from doing certain death rites that other parts, other types of Jews can do. And so the whole idea is, it's not like Pokemon. You're never going to catch them all. You gotta be humble and know you do as much as you can, and you're not expected to do any more. So, and this is where the different divisions within Judaism get into fights with each other. You may see that there's an Israeli rabbi, I'm hesitant to use that word because of what I'm about to say next, who claims that he won't call Tree of Life in Pittsburgh a synagogue because it's not an Orthodox synagogue, and Orthodox Israeli rabbis only recognize the Orthodox. That, in my practice of Judaism, is totally anathema to the humility inherent in never being able to do it all. Orthodoxy is completely... The idea of Judaism, and I know it seems so strange that a religion with 613 rules was considered practical and portable by its day, but that was an age, 6,000, 7,000 years ago, where religion was, it factored into every element of life, and it was a step away from that. But every commandment has an ethical underpinning. And the type of Judaism I practice teaches that it is less important that you fulfill the exact ritual of the commandment than it is that you understand the ethics behind that ritual. So, some people who live in areas that don't have a kosher butcher eat organic, because it's the same idea. The truth is that in this day and age, some people don't buy kosher meat at all because they believe that the idea of ritual slaughter that was intended to be as least painful for the animal as possible. Some people actually believe that kosher slaughter is actually more painful than other forms, and there's a lot of debate over that. And some people don't keep kosher because I think, standard regular meat is actually killed more humanely Now, there's more to kosher than that. You're not supposed to eat blood. You're only supposed to eat the meat. A lot of kosher is just not adding insult to injury to the animal, which obviously as an animal lover, I connect with very strongly. And it would feel hypocritical to me to treat one animal as friends and treat other animals as things not worthy of basic dignity, respect, and kindness. And, even animals that we eat. Not me personally, because I don't eat meat. I only eat fish. But you know what I'm saying? Like it's all, Israel means struggle, and it's all a struggle against hypocrisy. And I am going somewhere with this. I am getting into the talking to the traumatized. And I've been thinking a lot about this because, there's this whole definition of Jews as a stiff-necked people. That's how we refer to ourselves. Mormons are the peculiar people. We're the stiff-necked people. I think Mormons actually have a cooler nickname. But part of the reason Judaism is so vengeful, God, is they know they were dealing with some pretty stubborn so-and-sos. And they didn't, again, it's about humility. And so the idea of obligation over charity, the idea of justice over charity. And it all goes to the golden rule, which I know people associate with Christianity, but it was actually, there's actually a form of the golden rule in every major religion around the world. The one in Judaism was coined by a guy named Hillel, who was actually only able to live to become a great scholar and philosopher because other rabbis broke the rule not to kindle fire on the Sabbath because he was freezing to death, sitting on a rooftop trying to listen to the rabbis debate. And the idea of debate, what debate means, has changed significantly in recent years. Even as far back as the 90s, when I was in high school, I did debate as part of a class. It was a modern Western civilization class, and it was a debate structure. And it was an actually really interesting course because it was a winner-take-all debate format. So the only way to get an A in the course was to win your debate. And there was this mythic figure in my old high school, a guy by the name of, was it Peter Miller or something like that? But that course, the Modern Western Civilization course, was the only one he didn't get an A in. Nobody had ever gotten an A in Modern Western Civ in the history of my old high school, C.W. Jeffries. And me, being an arrogant little kid, looked at my teacher at the time, Mr. Martin Ellis, said, I'm going to do it. And he kind of smirked. And I did it. And because they phased out OAC grade 13, the 2 years after I graduated, I was the only person in the history of that course to get an A because of debate. But debates have rules other than win. If anybody wondered what the debate was, it was all about the American Revolution, and I had to argue that the Boston Massacre was justified from the British side. I'm pretty good at debate because I looked at that and I'm like, I had to argue a position I didn't agree with. And that was the exercise. We got divided into two teams and got assigned things, and it didn't matter whether you agreed or not. You had to argue your case. And that was a good learning experience. I mean, my best friend got put on the Yankee side, and I was like, we coped because it got so heated at times because the stakes were so high. It was like, 15% of your grade, 10% of your grade, something like that. But we adopted the personas of that Looney Tunes, you know, that Warner Brothers cartoon with the sheepdog and the coyote, and Morton Sam, Morton Ralph, and then they beat the crap out of each other and then punch out, and Evening Sam, Evening Ralph, and that's how we coped. We left it in the room because otherwise, I mean, friendships were getting torn apart. That was incredible preparation for today, because what we all kind of realized was no grade was important enough to tear each other apart. It was really good training, not only for university, where every paper is worth a huge portion of your grade, but also for life, when, you know, what your victory conditions are and what the victory conditions that are you're told should be don't have to be the same. And setting expectations is really important. And it doesn't seem like everybody got that wonderful education, not just in academics, but in life. Not only how to debate with rules and debate fairly. The other part of the debate was the winner was not decided by the teacher. It was basically decided by a Supreme Court style. There was a small portion of students who were on either side. They were like the judges, and they decided. And so there was a bit of a popularity thing as well, which I had to be extra good because I wasn't that popular. But it was really good training because you weren't in control. It wasn't necessarily fair. And the path to victory was setting appropriate expectations and doing your best within that framework. And that is what we're really lacking now. I've become convinced in this past week that President Trump is not a leader of our age in the conventional sense. He is just holding on to the zeitgeist and just hanging on for fun and profit. He is an avatar of this age. He is a reflection of it, not a driver of it. Because even before he got elected, the debate became not, let's have a fair debate, may the best person win. It's more important that we all sort of learn something than who wins or loses. I mean, every formal debate I've been to, who wins or loses is really less important than lively debate, good points on each side. Because again, with Oxbridge rules for debate, it's a system that's very easy to game. Like, I figured out after my first debate, oh wow, if I'm actually invested in this outcome, the best thing to do is vote for the side you disagree with, because the winner in a classic debate is not determined by how strongly people feel about their position, but how many minds you manage to change. So a weak flip from one position to the other position is better than a strident, passionate, fixed viewpoint. And that really changes not only who you're arguing to, but what your tactics are in that argument. And that also was a really good learning experience, because that is not how debate is defined in the age of social media and in the age of, we call it hyper-partisan politics, but apparently it's only about 14% of the population that is whiter and richer than everybody else. And the vast majority of people are actually far more moderate, and they just want everybody to stop screaming. I got that from a David Brooks column in the New York Times, if anybody's wondering the source of that. But it's very different when you're interested in persuading as opposed to being interested in solidifying a viewpoint. And that's very important to consider when you're dealing with somebody in a heightened state, in an emotional state. And I see a lot of people online criticizing people for being emotional in times where really any human being would be emotional. And you don't persuade anybody by doing that. They just think you're an asshole because they don't remember exactly what you said. They don't remember the brilliance of your points. They just remember you were a jerk to them. They felt kicked when they were down. And if you want to talk to, i.e. persuade a person in a heightened state, the most important thing you can do is listen. And that's why I said that the title of this video was a bit of a misnomer. But I don't get to make my points. I don't get to show how smart I am if I'm just listening. And that's really not true. I've had some conversations this week where I just practice what's called active listening, listening to understand. Listening to understand is a wonderful skill, and it is a skill that takes practice and learning, because you have to put yourself in a mindset where you're setting your own opinions aside and really trying to understand the other person. And this goes back to that guy Hillel I mentioned, because Hillel was one of those philosophers who believed that you must thoroughly understand the other side before you can effectively present your own. And the Hillelian method of argument, the Hillelian method of debate, is you present the other side first. Now, my colleague here will tell you that X, Y, Z, Z for Americans. Now, the only way you're effective at that is if you actually understand your colleague's viewpoint. And they try to say my colleague instead of my opponent. That's Britishism as well. It's kind of like we're all friends here. This is friendly debate, a debate among gentlemen. And that only works if you actually do understand the opposing view. A lot of people can't do that because they lack the confidence in their own convictions, or they lack the mental fortitude and acuity to actually open themselves up to another side, see merit in it, and still find a way to present a persuasive disagreement. And part of that process is getting really good at listening. Now, when you're talking to somebody who's very upset, they will probably say a lot of things that you disagree with or that actually hurt. I find a lot of people when they're traumatized, they lash out. And so a lot of people tend to attack the person that is trying to give them a friendly ear. And that's when things really get tough. You can't let them do that. You have to set very gentle boundaries of, what you will and will not, you will or will not accept while you're listening to them. And there are ways of doing it that don't put the person off. And that is far more art than science. You really have to read the situation, and sometimes you get it wrong, and you're not going to win every time here. You're not going to necessarily succeed in making a person feel even any better, but at least you tried. But if you do succeed, you can put in little points here and there. My understanding is that your perspective is this. That's interesting. I hadn't considered it that way. Where I come from is this perspective, but I see in your place what you're saying makes sense. I can see where you're coming from. By modern standards, that's giving in, and that's a bad thing. But what I find that actually does in reality is you have made the other person feel heard, which makes them more likely to lower their guard and listen to you. And that's a very powerful thing. The problem is you try to do it on something like Facebook or Twitter and you get 20 other people jumping on you and they freaking ruin it. You can't have a discussion. And I've had things that went off the rails that way. We took it private and it ended up being a really, really good discussion. Because one-on-one allows you to ask questions, allows you to make sure you understand. It's a slower process because you have to go back and forth of, This is what I understand your perspective is. Did I get that right? And then, you give them the opportunity to tell you, yeah, or no, there's this part you left out. But what ends up happening is a person feels heard. And people who feel heard feel more in control. And people who feel more in control, the trauma goes down, because trauma is very much linked to a feeling of a lack of control over one's circumstances, a lack of empowerment. That's the dynamic that takes something from unpleasant, uncomfortable, to traumatizing. That sense of control. The whole idea of coming back from trauma is regaining a sense of control. Keep in mind the person you're talking to probably has weak personal boundaries in general, or at that moment, because trauma compromises boundaries, like boundary integrity. And that's why it's so important to set an example of strong but flexible boundaries. Healthy personal boundaries aren't rigid. You can bend a little bit, but you can't break them. You can, it's like poking a balloon. You can go so far, you can poke your finger in it, but if you go too far, you'll pop it. That's the difference. An example of that is someone says something that you find unacceptable, and you can say, I'm going to give you that one because I get you're upset. I just really appreciate it if you didn't do that again. Instead of getting all outraged and everything like that. Because outrage is a sign a person's lost. Outrage is great for protests, and it's great for cable TV, but it's really not good for solving problems. And it's impossible to listen when you're outraged. So, and that's the thing. What you do by listening to the other person is you build trust. You establish a relationship based on trust. And then that person is going to be more open, not only to listening to you, but to consider your viewpoint. They may tell you you're wrong, straight up, feels like you've gotten nowhere. And then over time, they'll reconsider and maybe like a tiny bit of what you said makes an impact and changes their mind just slightly. And that is the purpose of healthy debate, not taking someone who has a view and making that view more extreme, but to actually open both sides up to parts of the opposing view that may have merit. And that's true in everything, but that's especially true when someone is acting from a place of fear. Because fear tends to create really bad solutions, anti-solutions, solutions that aren't actually solutions. They don't solve the problem, but they create another problem. And I'm seeing a lot of that lately. And, knee-jerking and this need above all else for security. I think we are actually living in a collective international trauma right now. And that's why nationalism is creeping up. That's why populism is creeping up. People just want to feel safe. People just want to feel secure. And they think that lining up behind the biggest bully is the way to do that. It's not. But you can totally understand why people think that when they're scared. So hopefully you found this a little bit helpful. Again, it's my perspective. I like hearing yours, but do it in a respectful way, right? Like, you come on like a ton of bricks, it's too much emotion. People just respond to how strident you are. They don't listen to the actual merit in your words. It's impossible to, because people are wired to deal with that onslaught of emotion first. So I'm interested to see what you guys would say. This is a different type of content. Gonna have a day and a bit before Feedback Friday. Interested to see how you respond to this. Okay, thanks for watching, and Twilight Vampire glowing. Happy Halloween, everyone.